Welcome back to The Gap, the podcast where we tackle one of the biggest challenges in America today, closing the retirement savings and coverage gaps, while also shining a light on what's actually working in our system. I'm Shannon Edwards, your host and president of TriStar Pension Consulting. I would like to welcome all listeners to our podcast with a special welcome to those listening for the first time. This is a special edition of The Gap. Today, we are recognizing Women's Retirement Security Day, and I cannot think of a more important topic for this show. As many of our listeners know, the focus of The Gap is right there in the name. We talk about the savings gap, we talk about the coverage gap, we talk about the work still ahead of us in the American retirement system, but we also talk about what is working because the private retirement system in this country has helped millions of workers save, invest, and build a more secure future. And today's conversation sits right at the intersection of those two ideas, acknowledging the progress we have made while being honest about the gaps that remain. Women's retirement security does not start at retirement. It starts much earlier. It starts with the money messages girls hear growing up. It starts with access to workplace savings. It is affected by pay, caregiving, time away from work, divorce, widowhood, confidence, and whether women have access to trusted advice at the moments when they need it most. That is why Women's Retirement Security Day matters. It gives us a chance to pause, focus, and ask, what are we doing to help women not just retire, but retire with confidence, dignity, and security? I am so pleased to have two wonderful guests with me for this conversation. Cindy Hansel is the founder and president of Wiser, the Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement. Cindy is an attorney and nationally recognized retirement expert who has spent decades working to improve women's retirement outcomes. Through Wiser, she has helped educate women, advocates, policymakers, and the public about the challenges women face in securing retirement income. She also serves as director of the National Resource Center on Women and Retirement, has testified before Congress, and has been widely recognized for her leadership in this space. And joining Cindy is Stephen Welch, managing partner of Crownmark Wealth Advisors in Atlanta. Stephen has extensive experience in retirement planning, workplace retirement plans, and corporate financial strategies. Before launching Crownmark Wealth Advisors, he served at Morgan Stanley as a retirement plan advisor and corporate retirement director. Stephen works closely with clients on comprehensive financial planning, and he brings a particularly valuable perspective to today's conversation through his work with female clients, his support for women entering the advisory profession, and his commitment to developing the next generation of retirement leaders. This is going to be a conversation about awareness, but also action. We will talk about why the gaps exist, how they show up in real women's lives, and what plan sponsors, advisors, employers, families, and the broader retirement industry can do to help close them. Cindy and Stephen, thank you both so much for being here and welcome to The Gap.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Cindy, why did women's retirement security become your life's work?
Well, I had worked for a company for 10 years and they decided to freeze the pension, and no one could tell me what that meant. It was 30 years ago I started Wiser, and people would say to me, "Oh, the company just doesn't want you to know why they're doing it." And I said, "No, nobody knows. Nobody can answer the question. This is the first one that ever got frozen." And so I want to know, do I put it in the freezer and wait, till I'm like 80 or something and then start taking it out of the freezer? But there was no such opportunity. So anyway, I made it my commitment because I came to Washington, went to law school, and actually ended up like working on retirement. So that was what pulled it all together for me. So
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Stephen, what drew you to retirement planning and workplace plans?
Wow. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to do this because it is absolutely important work. My journey into financial advisory actually started in a retirement plan. I worked for a telecommunications company in the early 90s, and not knowing and not having enough education about investing, I did what most people did. I just kind of guessed it and winged it. Unfortunately for me, I ended up putting, 10% of my income into
Mm.
the corporate retirement plan, the 401k, 90 plus percent of that being directed towards the company stock. And in the early 2000s, when that company then filed for bankruptcy, I
Mm.
lost about $270,000. The impact to me was not only financial, but it was an awakening. It made me understand and realize that, I knew nothing about investing at that point. In those early days, I was in my mid 20s at that point and knew very little about investing, whether it was stocks or bonds or anything. And so the realization was there was a whole world of investments that I knew nothing about. I couldn't even really put together how I had lost or what I had lost. There were no advisors to give me direction and guidance. And so, watching an account go from 200 plus $1,000 to zero overnight, left kind of a
Yeah.
painful mark on me. And so when I got into the industry years later, it became my work not only to help participants and provide them the guidance that, I never got, but to make sure that none of that, what happened to me, happens to anybody on our watch. So, that's where my passion lies, and that's why I'm so heavily involved in securing retirement for the common person.
That is an awesome why. I love that. I hate that you had to go through that, but that it led you here is really, it's really awesome. I want to ask both of you, what does retirement security mean to each of you? And Cindy, we'll start with you.
Okay. Um, Sorry, I'm reading my question here. What it means to me is I started a new life when I learned what it meant to lose your pension. I was part of a little commission in Washington, and these were three things that were going to make you a failure in your retirement for women, and that was divorce, longevity, and not having a retirement plan at the workplace. And so I had just qualified for, basically all those lifetime um, changes. And I saw that there were so many women. The divorce rule is actually pretty easy if you know that there is such a rule, and somebody tells you, no, you can't have any part of that pension, or it doesn't belong to you. You can't do that in a divorce, which is not the rule. And
Mhm.
so what I saw that was one of the easiest ways to get to women, and it perked a lot of it, I don't know, excitement about the fact we were teaching when we started, even women in prison who were
Mm.
like had been in for a long time, and because of their age, a lot of them were being released. And when we told them about the divorce rule, it was for them like winning the lottery, because they had kids waiting for them on the outside. And it was just an interesting concept that that would be the first group of women that would jump on that rule. So
Mhm.
um, anyway, and then, we run the National Resource Center on Women in Retirement, and that's been a great opportunity for women. That's what we spend most of our time doing. And I'll be helping Stephen getting some of his people to like pay attention to some of those rules and look at the resources down in Atlanta, especially. We have partners down there also. So it's very exciting. Um,
Wonderful.
and the
Wonderful.
resource center, what people like about it is a lot of women that have little income saved for retirement, people start telling them about budgeting. And if they're working a couple of jobs or hard jobs, they already know how to budget. I mean, they know that they only have limited resources. And so the important thing for them is getting some kind of a foundation of how the financial system works for them. And over the weekend, I was laughing because I had somebody come and was planting in my garden for me in the heat. And he was telling me, he was saying, like, what do you do? And I told him, and And he said, well, I know, he said, this friend of mine, she just turned 85 and she just found out that she has a penalty for her her Medicare premiums because she didn't sign up at 65. She never got a letter. And I said, well, she doesn't get a letter. You have to be looking for it at 65 and go sign up yourself. And so here's somebody who spent her life doing financial education and was an attorney and a tax lawyer, and she had a lot of qualifications, but nobody ever told her. So she's being penalized. So some of the things that we share with people seem so simplistic. It's just, I didn't know, but if you know, then you can make a lot of good changes, and people get excited about that. So, which is why we even do that with the younger people, who, believe it or not, can get excited about retirement. It's wonderful to see. So, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Stephen, what does retirement security mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's allowing you to continue in a lifestyle that you've grown accustomed to. I mean, people work their entire lives to quote unquote retire and be able to kind of live life the way they want to on their terms versus working for someone that says, hey, you have to be at the office at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
You can leave at 5. And so retirement security to me means helping people to craft a life after work that they will truly enjoy for the things that they then determine when they get up, when they're able to relax, and when they can take vacation. So, for me, it's helping others to shape the future for themselves and in a lifestyle that they desire.
Why do you think that this issue in particular deserves its own annual day of recognition?
To me, it's everyone's journey, right? I mean, we will
Mhm.
all work, right, and we will all retire, right, and so and then certainly at some point we will all die, right? We will all pass away, and so the more control you can have over that journey from beginning to end really deserves its attention because we're all going to get there. The differentiator is how will we get there? And so I think the answer to the how will we get there really depends on the amount of guidance you get, the
Mhm.
advice and direction that you receive while you're in the midst of that journey. And you can really see a differentiator between those. I look at myself as a prime example. I didn't have the guidance. And
Mhm.
so I made what could have been a catastrophic mistake. I had invested everything I had into a corporate retirement plan in the company stock, right? And
Mhm.
had I been older, had this happened to me in my 50s or 60s, it would have been devastating. Fortunately for me, it happened young enough that I could recover, and thankfully, it gave me this beautiful career and a passion that I can pursue. You know, to help resolve this for others. But it deserves its time because it is so important and it impacts every single person that has a career that aspires to continue a lifestyle into their later years, or what I call their twilight years,
Mhm.
beyond employment. So yes, it does deserve the attention. It impacts every single individual on this planet.
Stephen, does your retirement plan work teach you about the power of the workplace?
Yeah, it is, the workplace is the most impactful thing that people do. I mean, sometimes the work that we do defines us, defines who we are.
Mhm.
It defines who our generation will be, and our children and our families. And so the workplace has a massive influence. I mean, if you are a minimum wage worker and you do not have access to retirement to prepare for those twilight years, the reality is that you will work forever. I think one of the things that I try to impress upon participants and plan sponsors is that retirement is not an age. We have been conditioned to believe that retirement is an age. It's 65. And
Mhm.
it's not. And what I try to do is help people understand that retirement a state of financial condition, not an age. And the example that I always use with folks is if you are 65 and you have $50,000 in your retirement savings and you have an annual expense of $50,000, you can't retire. However, if you're in your 40s and someone hands you a check for $5 million, guess what? You can retire. And so
Yes.
it is less about age and more about financial condition. And that financial condition is really determined by how you prepare for that eventual event of retirement.
Yeah. I want to ask both of you, and Cindy, I'll start with you. Who or what shaped the way each of you talks about money? Was it a mentor, a client, a family experience? What shaped the way you talk about money?
Oh, I think my dad was in the military and we moved all over the place, and I sort of learned how nobody knew those things actually. People complained about money all the time because there wasn't enough of it, but they didn't know, the answers or how to change the situation. It's not like you can go just apply for, an increase in your salary just because you happen to be in the military. So I think that made a big impact on me. And my dad, I was an only child, and I had a mother who was like, she had like chronic conditions, and so she didn't really pay any attention to that. So I was sort of my dad's sounding board, like
Hmm.
what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I guess he was my mentor, but um, it was something that he cared about and tried to help other people with. People came to him for advice, even though he didn't have a lot of schooling about that. It was a long time ago. So
Yeah.
anyway, but the world was different. This is like, it's like so different from anything that I experienced, even when I started Wiser. So I think it's great that people pay attention more and try to get, retirement account in their workplace benefits and realize how important that is, and to pay attention and what's happening to that money. I mean, Stephen and I in many ways had a similar experience. I lost my long-term pension, but he lost, he could see the value of the cash. Like none of us could see how bad losing that frozen
Hmm.
pension was going to be until we got to the age of, say, 60, to see, like, really, that's 10 years. Poof. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Stephen, how about you?
Yeah, listen, I grew up in a very simple family, and like many of us, I didn't have my parents couldn't teach me what they didn't know, right?
Hmm.
They didn't have a background in investment or finance, and so I would say that the what shaped my view of money was really the lack. Right? I didn't
Hmm.
grow up with wealth. And so that workplace experience at age 23, which is when I started that company, you're not thinking about retirement. I'm like, how can I pay my rent and my car
Right.
and get to work? And so, it was lost on me the value of the retirement plan. And it wasn't until that event happened, losing everything really at the time, really shaped and molded me. It forced me to learn about an industry and a very valuable part of everyone's life, which is savings and investment. It propelled me into a situation where I literally went to the library and pulled Investment for Dummies off the bookshelf and read it cover to cover. And because I had never been exposed to it to that degree, I had to read it twice, maybe even three times before it started to really set in what had happened to me and what I needed to do for my future to make sure that I could have a successful retirement outcome, and to build wealth and be able to create the security and safety, not only for myself personally in those younger days, but later on in life, as now I'm responsible, I'm a husband, I'm a father, to be able to really guide and navigate this world of finance and investment more securely for not only myself, but also for my family. So, if you're asking me, where was there a mentor? I think there were several.
Hmm.
Was there something or someone that gave me a life lesson? I think it was that catastrophic event, if you will. I think life is oftentimes not what happens to you, but how you react to it. And fortunately for me, I was able to react to it in a way that gave me this wonderful career and the ability to impact others with my experience to help them avoid some of the pitfalls and challenges that I've faced.
Thank you for sharing that. Cindy, was there a moment when it just came to you and you thought, this needs a national conversation? We have got to be talking about this on a wider plane.
Well, I think I was in Washington for enough of those conversations, those commissions on Social Security and Medicare and all of that. So I guess I just didn't have that thought in my head. I just knew that women were behind and that nobody was telling them the things that they needed to know. And
Mhm.
so when we started Wiser, one of the exciting things was because it was a different world, the foundation that gave us startup money had an opportunity to get our booklet, our 10-page booklet with sort of all those little gotchas of what you need to know, and they put the booklet in Good Housekeeping magazine, and that at that time that was the time when people just waited for those magazines.
Yeah.
People still wait for people, but I
Yeah.
think, but it's different for it was what every woman needs to know. And even when I was sitting in my office and I was new to all of it, we had just set up the office, and they were sending in little pieces from that I would like to have a copy of this, and sent money. And so, like, help use this to help other women. People, would put in like a couple of extra dollars and everything. And so it was amazing, and it proved to me like how much people were looking for something that was going to help them understand and make changes. So that was my
Very nice.
conversation anyway with people. So still having that conversation.
Well, it's a much needed conversation. Stephen, is there a plan sponsor or participant story that has really stuck with you?
Oh God. I mean, we're talking about the 20 years, right? The last 20 years of life.
Yeah.
There are so many in terms of, conversations. I've had participants that, you know, as it relates to beneficiaries, right? One of the most impactful things is early in my career, I received a call from a participant that, you know, her late fiance hadn't changed his beneficiary document. Uh,
Mm,
and, just he had been previously married and just, and divorced, but never changed the beneficiary document. And so when he unfortunately passed away in a workplace accident, his fiance, they'd been together for almost a decade, and they were supposed to get married, and I think in the coming year she called
mm,
and was looking to claim the benefits that he had, assuming that she was the beneficiary, only to find out that no, he had never changed it. He had been divorced for, a number of years and just never changed the document. And so for me, that kind of stuck with me because it happened early in my career. And so as I meet with plan sponsors and participants, I'm very focused on making sure that they update their beneficiary documents and that they keep that information up to date. But I mean, just watching, the number of participants that go through this journey and look up at age 60 and say, hey, I'm going to retire in 5 years. And that's when they start to focus on, what's in my account, what's my balance, and seeing that and the disappointment to them that, listen, you really don't have enough prepared to retire in 5 years. you haven't done the work. And so, that drives my passion to make sure that we're educating people earlier, that, financial resources and access to information is readily available to participants, whether they're 23 like I was starting out, or they're in their 50s looking at what I call the retirement red zone, where you've got to really put it all together, is important to me. And so I think there are a lot of participants that have impacted my view and my perspective on the retirement journey. But for me, it's really taking all of these pain points and turning them into success stories where, I've watched participants, retire and say, hey, look, I'm retiring next year, and looking at their balance and seeing, hey, look, they've got enough, or putting a plan together for them, from a wealth management perspective. Because, the journey up the hill is pretty easy. It's the decumulation side that gets more challenging. And so, what I look to do is help drive people's results on the front end and then prepare them for the journey on the downside of their employment history. So, I think it's a lot of people that have influenced my perspective.
In your opinion, why can't we treat women's retirement security as a once a year message?
Because it's not a once a year thing. It's a per paycheck thing, right? I mean, it's
Okay.
so, you can't look up and say, oh, well, once a year I'm going to check on my health, or once a year I'm going to check my blood pressure. It's not that type of conversation. It's something that needs to be worked at. And, it's about consistency, just like anything else in life, whether it's your physical health or your emotional health or your finances. It's something that you have to be responsible for on a frequent basis, because it's not the thing that you do at one moment. It's the little things that you've done over decades that really start to add up, and create the environment for that successful retirement outcome. So you can continue your life in your twilight years in the way that you would like to, or that you've grown accustomed to. And so I think that's really the reason why this has to be a continuous discussion, not just a once a year event, or a once in a while topic, or let me check every couple of years. It really needs to be an ongoing dialogue.
So Cindy, we've talked about the fact that women's retirement security is affected by gaps in pay, time off for caregiving, longevity, and just workplace access to plans. What gap do you think compounds the fastest? What do you think that which of those, and maybe there's not just one that makes the gap compound the fastest, but in your opinion, is there one that makes it compound faster than another?
Yeah, I mean, I think for women especially, the issue is that they don't realize that they're going to have to pay for those extra years. So I always say, if you're at the Thanksgiving table and you have, Auntie so and so who's in their 90s, and then somebody else who's waiting for their 100th birthday, you better recheck all your numbers and make sure, realize what's going to happen. And the other big issue these days, well, there are two big issues, I think, is the fraud issue, and that just is everyone. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
how much money you have. I think people are just afraid of losing. There are too many bad stories going around that people worry about. And then caregiving for mainly women. I mean, women are just doing more of the things that with their mother that their brother is not going to be doing. So, or somebody else in the family. And so the caregiving is a huge issue. And there are scary studies around showing that like women end up homeless because they ended up doing too much unpaid caregiving and left their jobs, and didn't try to find other help where there might be other help, and even from other family members. And so that's a big passion for a lot of people that I know, is making sure that people understand the financial issues around caregiving and what that
Mm-hmm.
means. So
Stephen, what do you think plan sponsors need to understand about women who are participating in the plan but still falling behind?
Yeah, I mean,
It,
oh, I'm sorry. I thought you
Nope.
wanted me.
Go.
So,
Both of you can
okay.
go.
Go ahead.
Cindy, you go first. Ladies first.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that the longevity issue means that you're probably going to need more money to keep living the life that you're living today. And so that people don't think about that so much. And the actuaries don't like when you say that women need more money because they think, you're going to scare people away from saving at all you if you tell them that they're going to need more money. So
Yeah.
anyway.
No, no, I agree with you, Cindy, and Shannon. I think it's all the parts that compound, right? And
Hmm.
I think plan sponsors need to understand a woman's journey through, employment into retirement is very different than most men, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I'll continue to work. Well, I continued to work while my wife was pregnant with our kids. I continued to work while she was caregiving, for her parents, right? It never stopped me. When you look at the numbers statistically, who was most impacted during COVID? Most women stepped away from work while their husbands continued to work. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that there are more gaps in their participation in retirement plans. To Cindy's point, longevity, right? So women will outlive most men, statistically, requiring greater resources in retirement. So I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's many things. And I think plan sponsors as a whole need to be more clear and aware that there needs to be more focus on helping women gain access to investment resources and guidance. It's not something that's often spoken about. Fathers, myself included, I'm a girl dad, right? So, I've seen and watched fathers spend time teaching their sons how to throw a ball, teaching their sons how to balance a checkbook. But is that same focus and attention being paid to their daughters?
Hmm.
Right. And so I think there needs to be greater awareness for young ladies about financial investments and financial tools. It's not just about, oh, let me teach my daughter how to cook and clean. It is, how do you run a household, right? And I think it was such a I think in many places it is so dated to have that mindset of, oh, okay, my daughter's going to grow. I need to teach her how to care for a home. No, you need to teach her how to care for a home, but you also need to teach her how to balance a checkbook, how to make proper investment decisions, how to, you know, acquire real estate, how to build assets, how to build and create wealth, how to manage wealth. And so for me as a father, I have just as much focus on teaching my daughter how to throw a football as I do teaching her how to balance and make proper investment decisions and educating in them and guiding them about what their future really entails.
What do you think the industry gets wrong when they say just save more? That's the answer. Just save more.
It's not a saving problem as much as it is, a guidance problem. I think, as a whole, people are afraid of finance and investment. It's a
Hmm.
scary place. And so I think we need to demystify some of this. I always say it's not rocket science, it's how it's delivered. And so changing the language around how we talk about finance and investment matters. How we deliver that message to participants, male and female. I mean, there are a lot of men that are afraid of investing. They don't understand it, and so I think there's a human nature response to back away from things that are scary or that we don't understand. We hear the horror stories, and so people run from that. And so I think we need to bring a clarity and understanding and a common theme to the discussion and demystify it in so many ways. And so, I think that would be really, really helpful. Let's not talk about the alpha and the quant, factors of
Yeah,
this. Let's make it plain and simple. Hey, listen, this is how much you will need in retirement. Here's a pathway and here's a game plan for that, and make it very simple for people.
I agree. And it's so funny because I think when I was young, we were taught that talking about money was rude. And you didn't do that. You didn't ask people
Sure.
how much they made. You didn't ask people those questions at all. So I think getting rid of those stigmas is really important so that we can start having those conversations.
No, absolutely. It was, in our day, it was, hey, go sit over there. This is grown folks' business, right? When dad was doing taxes or mom was, trying to balance the budget, right? And
Yeah.
it was, go sit off there or go play outside. This is grown folks' business. And the reality is those children grow into grown folks, right?
Yeah.
They're not learning at the level if they're not sitting at the table while we're doing our taxes, right? If they're not sitting at the table when there's a real estate transaction, or where when we're trying to figure out, healthcare benefits or budgets, right?
Hmm.
Then they never get that education early on. And so one of the things that I try to do with my girls is I involve them, I engage them in those conversations. I want them to see, hey, look, we're closing on this house. Here's how we got this, or here's how we have to budget, now in preparation for the things that we want. And so I think the more we can include our children in those conversations early on, then as they age and get into the workforce, they'll understand these concepts. I think the education needs to begin sooner than later.
Agreed. Cindy, what progress so far makes you most proud?
Um, I think the fact that people don't say why women, like the word is out there, why women, like why wiser would matter, um, to women
Hmm.
more than men or whatever. So we used to get that in the beginning. So people would say, well, why, what about everybody else? Like, yes, well, look at those aunts around the table, that's why women, that's part of it. But I think that's a big piece of it. And also the longevity issue has really impacted people. I think there's a lot of discussion about how, there are these studies and they show how long women live and compared to men um, but nobody pays attention to those numbers. And that's the purpose of those studies, is to look and see what factors you might have in your family that make it important for you to
Hmm.
concentrate on the issues of longevity. So I think there's just a lot of that discussion around, which there never would have been, 10,
Hmm.
10, even 10 years ago. And so I think that's very exciting. And the fact that women are doing the caregiving and seeing how it impacts their own life. And I think there's a lot of help coming down the road because there's so many new proposals out there that employers are paying attention to, on like flexible hours and what are some of the things that can be done that would make it easier for people to stay in a job and not just throw their hands up and just say, I can't keep doing all of this. So I think that's a good thing for employers too. I mean, they want to make it better, I think. So anyway.
Yeah. Um, what do you all think we're getting right in the private retirement system?
Hmm. I think the parts of really emphasizing how important it is to start early. Things like automatic enrollment, I think, have made a dramatic impact on
Hmm.
the retirement savings, rates and the success of more and more participants getting engaged in a plan sooner than later. I think, legislation and features like auto increase, have helped the retirement story. So I think they're getting it right. I think doing things like, allowing practitioners that are actually doing the work to have an impact on creating legislation around
Mm.
retirement matters, because laws get written oftentimes by folks that don't experience it. They're not doing the work. And so our ability to impact an industry as plan advisors is important. And I think having more folks involved and more impact on the way retirement plans work and how the legislation is written and the rules around it matters. So I think the industry as a whole is getting better. A lot of work still to be done, certainly, but I think we are moving in the right direction in a lot of ways.
Cindy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking that people need to know that there's like there are bills in Congress, and when they start passing bills getting close to the end of the year, there would stand a good chance to see some really helpful things in caregiving, like out-of-pocket expenses,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, that people don't even realize that, that they're spending that much money going to the drugstore, getting medications, or doing things that they're just doing it on the fly and not thinking, well, where is this money coming from out of my pocket? But there's good legislation around, and so I think that's that's helpful. So
What gives you all hope for the next generation of women savers?
Hmm.
well, I mean, the one thing that always makes me sort of sad, that's why I like our program with the college students, is
Mm-hmm.
that they begin to think like, well, I'm not even going to get any money from Social Security, or I'm just throwing my money away or whatever. But once they start to know the issues, they get excited about ways that they can tell their fellow, generation, about like where the money goes and what we can do and how do we make sure that we're all going to be able to collect that money, or our grandparents are going to collect it, or whatever. So I think that's a good thing. So, and to see young people get excited about retirement is wonderful. So,
Mm-hmm. Stephen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, what gives me hope is, as Cindy said, younger folks are getting involved. They're thinking more about retirement at an earlier age, especially women, right? And the journey is very different, as I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a increased awareness of retirement, and the financial responsibilities that each young person has, not only for themselves but their families. I think there's an increased awareness that Social Security is not going to be enough. It was never designed to be the only resource of retirement income for people, and I think that it's very much like the concept of retirement at 65. I think we've been falsely given the hope that Social Security is how I'm going to retire. I'm going to press the button and get a check every month that covers all my needs and wants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a false narrative. And so I think there's an increased awareness. So that gives me hope, as well as the fact that, I'm seeing young women now getting more engaged in the industry at large. That's inspiring to me, to see the change and the shift happen, to be able to walk into rooms and see a more balanced demographic, than I've seen in my earlier years when I started in the industry, it would be a room full of men. And now we're seeing that shift. And so that really is inspiring and helps me feel like, yeah, we're making progress. Again, more work to be done,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah, I know when I started in the industry and I would go to conferences, I was like one of five women probably that were there. And now, as I look out at like the ASPA conferences, the TPA conferences, that side of the industry, you have seen a huge shift where I think really the women are at least half of the population and maybe more than that now, on our side of the industry. And I know when I know that the financial advisor side has a little bit to go to get to those kind of numbers, but I have seen a huge increase in the number of women on that side as well at the conferences that I have the pleasure of attending. So
Yeah, absolutely.
um, so Stephen, we've talked about the fact that you have a lot of female clients. And so what I want to know is what questions do women ask that men normally don't, and what concerns do you hear from them that the industry really underestimates?
Yeah, no, great question. So my engagement with my female clients and prospects is very different. Men are very bottom line. What's your performance going to be? And if I give you X, what am I going to get out of it? And I think that's fairly common without broad brushing it. But yes, my female clients ask me things about care. How many times am I going to be able to meet with you?
Mhm.
How often will we be discussing my future? How are you going to help guide me? How are you going to help educate me? Are the questions that I rarely get from my male clients, especially initially. And so I think those are things and considerations that as advisors we need to be aware of. How am I going to care for this young lady as she makes her journey through employment into retirement and to build and create a legacy for herself and her family? How is it different? And we as advisors, especially male advisors, need to be more in tune and aware of the differences and be prepared to address those questions, concerns, because the questions that women ask about investment and guidance and retirement and longevity and legacy are very different,
Mhm.
because their journey is very different. They'll ask questions about their children, where most of my male clients don't ask those same questions, at least not in the same way. And so,
Mhm.
we I think as an advisor, I try to be very attentive to what her needs are versus his needs.
Mhm. Very nice. Cindy, what's the difference between education and empowerment, and what kind of messages do you think actually build confidence?
I, I mean, I think of what I hear from people, which I think is interesting. I was thinking about that with your questions yesterday, and I find it fascinating that when people hear something that strikes them, and for everybody it's different, I mean, their own life experience, then they say, you know what really impressed me? I know everybody says you're supposed to start early, and I didn't start early, but I saw that chart you brought where if you started saving in your 20s instead of in your 40s, that you would have this much more money in your when you went to retire. And so I'd like to know more about that. I want a copy of that chart, like I want to give it to all my women friends. It's so interesting. It's like it clicks. And I've seen that even with like the young people, like once they understand really what compound interest means. I mean, otherwise people don't go around just talking about it. So, but when they see how individually it can make such a big difference in their life, covers lot, you know, your how long you're going to work, like your health care, like needs, etc. That's one of the things people don't like to factor in either, that how much the premiums are going to
Hmm.
be and on your, health insurance as you get older, especially. Um, and so I think when it's like you push the right button with people, then they get really excited about it. And maybe it's what they need sometimes. During the pandemic, we do a lot of educating for the network of aging professionals, and so it's a government program pretty much. It's a you know most of the people work for different agencies in the government or used to, and so what was fascinating with the with the pandemic was that people really made a difference. Like people even downsized, like I finally did with the calculations that you were telling us we need to do with those tools you tell us are available. And so I think, it's exciting when you see that happen, when people are so happy, but I never really understood it enough to be doing it. And so when a lot of my friends were like losing their jobs and, things were happening, I felt really like competent and confident that I was going to have enough money because I'd already taken care of that before the bad part, before we all started losing our jobs or, because of the pandemic. So I think, that's exciting for people to be able to not worry.
Yeah, agreed. Um, how early do you think that money conversations should start? And how does the message change as people get older? So how does the message change from like your teens to your 20s to your 50s? Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great question. How early should the money conversation start? When speech and language matter. I mean, that's my way of saying, as soon as possible. I mean, I have a little thing I do with my daughter, who's 10, my youngest, and I let her, when we go out to dinner, we'll get the bill, and I let her do the math on the tip, right? And it's my way of kind of teaching her, hey, this is how much this costs, right?
Hmm.
It's reinforcing her understanding of math and how to calculate. But it also is giving her the power of saying, hey, look, I'm responsible for this part. She knows that when the bill comes, I'm going to hand it to her, and I actually let her sign for me, on the payment, right? And so I'm instilling in her an understanding of finance early. And we talk about assets and liabilities. And, when it's a conversation about, oh, I want this toy versus that one, well, which one is most valuable and what's the value of things? So I think those conversations need to start very, very early. Um, you know, I didn't have that growing up. And so
Hmm.
part of my passion is to give that to my children. Um, the accumulation side is the easier part of the equation, right? It's,
Hmm.
put money in and the balance grows. And, I think there's unfortunately a perspective of set it and forget it. That's what I did in my 401k, right? I
Right.
set it up and then I never looked at it. I didn't I did all the things that I tell people not to do. I didn't look at any of my statements. I didn't follow the market. I didn't make any changes to my allocation when the markets went up or down. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so I
Hmm.
think that conversation needs to be ongoing, and consistent. And then the challenge is the decumulation side, right? The accumulation side is the easy part. Put the money in, set it, and move. The decumulation side is the part that you know I think is most challenging and requires even more education than before. And so I
Hmm.
think the conversation has to be ongoing and continuous, um, because the challenges change and it's an individual challenge. In our household, we became caregivers for aging parents. Wasn't in the plan.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of our equation. We'd never thought about it, until suddenly one day, right? And that impacted everything. It changed the way we looked at our future, our retirement. And I think this generation is uniquely challenged by what I call the sandwich generation, where taking care of aging parents, we're raising young kids, and somewhere there in the middle, we've got to figure out our own retirement journey and the financial impacts. Our parents are living longer, so we're having to take care of them for longer because they didn't figure it out. Right. And so I
Hmm.
think this generation is uniquely challenged. And so what I endeavor to do is to prepare my kids for when I'm older, right? And then hopefully they don't have to step in and be a resource to me in my twilight years. And so I'm preparing better, and I'm hopefully preparing them better for their journey as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Hey,
We're just gonna,
Cindy,
Mm-mm.
are we still on?
I'm here. I think we
Can you
lost.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I
Erica,
was
you
just gonna
there?
add something, so, um,
Oh, there we go.
there we
sorry.
go.
I was just gonna add we put out these, fact sheets and things about, when you're 50, when you're 60, when you're 70, or what are the things that you should know about? Partly because I had an economics professor at a big college, I won't name the college, that never signed up for her retirement, like when she, and so she ends up, like getting close to thinking like, I need to look into this. And they said, well, you're not in the retirement plan. And she said, how could that be? And nobody, nobody had
Mhm.
told her when she signed her papers when she was, getting the job 40 years earlier or something. But it's those are the things that really like sort of spark an interest in making sure that you know everything you're getting, with those employee benefits, and that you're signed up like you had mentioned earlier, Stephen, signing up in the right places.
Mhm.
Because it can change your whole life. For her, there was no recourse, basically. The school
Yeah.
wasn't going to give her the money that she didn't save for all those years. So I like the idea of basing it on age, that at least by the time you're 50, you should know these things, and, check up on them means like going to the office, knocking on the door and finding somebody, or getting online and keep finding somebody to make sure that you're in the right zone of wherever you need to be. So anyway,
No, I think you're spot on, Cindy. I mean, and the conversation is different, right? I mean, the conversation that I would have with my 20-year-old self would be different than the conversation I had with my 30 or 40-year-old self, because your priorities shift. When we that, look at it from that prism or that perspective, I look at 23. Like I said, my focus was, okay, do I have enough money to pay my
Yeah.
rent and pay my car payment and maybe get out and have some fun, right? That's a those thoughts are they don't even register for someone in their mid 30s, right? They're
Mhm.
not concerned about, going out and having fun or how much is my bar tab going to be. They're more focused on how do I, am I married? Am I single? Am I, raising children? What is tuition? What is, my kids' tuition look like? And then as you get into your 40s, well, it's, how do I acquire a home? How do I, prepare for, what's the daycare bill like?
Yeah.
And so the conversation around retirement and financial awareness and financial skills really has to evolve depending on the demographic that you're speaking to. And I think that's one of the things that we as financial advisors can really hone in on and bring to the table, because the conversation is different. And I think that's why it's important to have, you know, to cover that generational gap. When I was 20, I'm not going to listen to a 60-year-old tell me that I need to prepare for retirement. It just wasn't. And now that I'm, creeping towards those higher numbers, I used to be the young gun, and now I'm the old guy in the room. Um, I have to be very aware that I'm speaking to a 20 something that isn't so much focused on, what life looks like in their 60s and 70s. They're more concerned with how do I, accumulate enough money to purchase a home. Right. And I think we've got to really shape the conversation a little differently based on who we're speaking to.
Yeah, I agree. Where do you all think women are still underserved by the retirement industry?
where do we begin? Uh, I think it's having the unique understanding that, a woman's journey is very different financially. There are
Hmm.
so many more considerations for women's journey into, retirement or wealth, whether it's, when am I having children? How many children am I having? I recently had a conversation with a client about a prenup, and she's, looking at getting married, and we're having those conversations,
Hmm.
being able to provide that type of guidance. And so I think in the workplace, I think plan sponsors and advisors need to just be aware, and more aware that there are differences in that journey, and be able to help, young women and the likes react and be able to respond, and be able to address the concerns that are very, very different, about healthcare and
Hmm.
elder care. Statistically, it's mostly women that become caregivers. And so
Hmm.
how does that impact your journey? And I don't know that we've really fully educated, advisors, plan sponsors, and women alike on what that looks like. These
Hmm.
considerations, these things that are around the corner that we don't see right now. And so I try to encourage, my clients and plan sponsors to consider those things. What is, your parents are in their 70s. What do their 80s look like? Are you prepared to take on the responsibility of your parents? And really kind of illuminating that for folks really does make them take a step back and go, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about caring for mom and dad in their 70s and 80s. Or
Hmm.
how prepared, one question I ask, how prepared are your parents for retirement? And when I ask that question, immediately I see the lights come on, like, oh God, I haven't thought about that. They hadn't factored that into the equation of their retirement or how it's going to
Hmm.
impact them. And so I think we just need to ask those questions.
Cindy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think the biggest thing for women with their employers and retirement plans is having access and knowing, that they're in the plan and all of that. But a lot of times people don't even know that they're eligible, or somebody
Hmm.
just tells them on the fly, well, you haven't worked here long enough, or, that type of thing. I find something that excites me is that when I work with some of the financial companies, the big companies like the insurance companies or those groups, and they'll say to me, well, I know that our client groups are not in a similar fixed position, with the same assets. And I say, yes, but whatever they hear from you, they're going to want in the future. And that's what's exciting, because that, like, I didn't know I could do that. Or I went to my boss and he said, if I worked 5 more hours, a week, and so I'm going to do it, he'll put me in the retirement plan. It's like before that, they didn't know anything. They didn't know that there was a retirement plan. So I think wherever you get your information, and it's out there in many different ways, and a lot of people are trying to make a difference, which is exciting. So
It is exciting. It is really exciting just to hear the conversations that we're having as compared to those that we were having even 10 or 15 years ago. So, Cindy, Wiser's resources have been described to me as practical tools for every stage of a woman's life. What do you think women are looking for most often in those resources, and what resource do you wish every woman knew existed?
um let's see. I mean, I think what people want is their particular information, which might not be the generic. I mean,
Hmm.
the worst of it is the small business people, because they don't have anyone who's ever run a small business, I run a small nonprofit, so it's like running a small business. So when people tell me, don't you think they should do this? I think like, no, I'm not going to sick those people onto these poor people that are trying to run a business or something. But, you know, to find the easiest way to get access for people and to and that's what I think people really like about our information. So so we have the National Resource Center on Women in Retirement. And with that, there's a lot of information on where you can get the resources or which tools you can use and, to figure out. And when people will say, well, I just heard on the radio some talk show and, you need $1 million for retirement. I'm never going to have $1 million. And you say, well, go to this tool over here and start putting in all the premiums you're going to be paying up until retirement age, and you'll see how they get to the $1 million. But you can do better, believe me. So so people like, finding out because they don't know how to do those calculations if, depending on your age, I think, and, what your family has done. Because I tell people if you come from a family where everybody's around the barbecue and they're talking about how the 401k is not doing well, then you know what kind of a family, you're in and where to get access. You can, who's that guy over there that was just spouting all these things about, target date funds and things that people that would help them make, help them like to invest. People need to, get rid of that. So anyway.
Yeah. I am that nerdy person at the family barbecues. I'm not gonna lie. Um, so this is our first Women's Retirement Security Day, the very first one, and we're going to have one annually. What do you all think plan sponsors should do between this year and next year?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, I think again, the work that we're doing around this is bringing awareness, right? And I think it starts there. First, you have to identify that there is a problem, and clearly define that problem before you can ever solve the problem, right? And so, I think what plan sponsors need to do is really understand that this is a problem that there are significant gaps and start to work with advisors and record keepers and TPAs on how to address these concerns. I think the being able to have resources for this data and look at their population demographically and not only from men to women but also what age groups do we have that we serve as employees. I think plan sponsors are starting to accept the responsibility of what they're putting together. It's not just, hey, let's have a plan, let's throw it out there, sign this piece of paper, and now we have a retirement plan. I think plan sponsors are now becoming clearly aware that they have a responsibility to the employees to be able to create a plan that works for their participants, not only at a broad level, but also down to the individual level. And so what I would like to see plan sponsors do over the course of the next year and then into the next decade is really accept that responsibility and then begin to take action, measurable, consistent, deliberate, intentional behaviors that create greater security for everyone at large in the retirement community, but also specifically focus on the needs of women. Because as we mentioned, there are interruptions in a woman's work history and their work in their work tenure. And some of those are voluntary and some of those are forced. There's not an option. Who's going to take care of grandma? When she's ill, those are forced situations. I didn't sign up for that. It just happened and you have to respond. And so unfortunately, women are historically the ones that have to step forward and do that. I don't know how we address those gaps, but it can be disruptive to a woman's career and the repercussions of that. Okay, I need to take a year off to have a child. I need to take another year off to raise that child, and then I'm going back to work in 6 months. Doesn't really work for everybody.
Hmm.
And so, because behind that might be, I'm about to go back to work. Now a parent has become ill, and now I have to continue, stop working for longer. And then how do we get back into the industry, right? I mean, it's the story that we've all been told and all felt in our younger ages of, oh, you need credit. Well, but you don't have any credit. Well,
Hmm.
how can I get credit if you won't give me credit? But you need credit to have credit. I think the story becomes, well, why did you stop working? Well, I've been off for 5 years. Well, why did an understanding of an employer to say, well, this person took this time out and so let me give them another opportunity. And so I think women are faced with that a lot more than men ever are, questioning gaps in their resume and why they took time out or why they took a year or 2 years or 5 years away from the workforce to address family concerns. I think
Hmm.
there needs to be a greater awareness and greater understanding of how to help folks navigate that, both on the employer and on the employee side.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. What do you, Stephen, think that financial advisors should be doing differently over the course of the next year?
Over the course of the next year, um, you know, that's a tough question. For me as an advisor, the things that I work on are a lot of the soft skills. How do I speak to people? How do I lead them, down this journey?
Hmm.
How do I make this complex, scary financial world very simple and benign that they can accept it and understand it? And so I think the psychology and the behavior of finance piece, I think, is becoming more and more important as a
Hmm.
financial advisor. Uh, because I think people are gaining more access through technology to the information, but they still need someone to translate. And so I look at what I do for a lot of my clients, male and female, um, as a translator, as somebody that can soften the scary complexity of it and make it very simple for them to understand. And I think advisors need to adopt the role as leaders and educators in the space that is a little confusing to others. Let's simplify it. Let's not make it so scary and complex. How can we meet the client at their level of understanding? And I think the work that I try to do in behavioral finance and in psychology and asking those questions, well, where are you in your understanding of investments? Are you a level 10 or are you a level 5? And if so, if you can admit to me that you're a 5, then I need to come down and meet you at that level of conversation,
Mm.
so it's clear and I'm not talking over you or below you in any way, shape, or form. And so if I were speaking to an audience of young, new advisors and even some older advisors, that would be the one thing I think that we all need to be able to do is be able to communicate at the client's level, so there's a clear understanding and it's not so intimidating or scary to them.
Agreed. Okay, I want each of you to complete this sentence. Cindy, we'll start with you. Closing the gap starts with blank.
Mm.
Starts with educating people about the savers match and waiting to hear when those regulations come out and make sure that you're one of the people that gets a match from the government as soon as they start.
Excellent. Stephen?
I would almost piggyback on that. It starts with education early.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've said this before, that we used to have home economics,
Mm-hmm.
but I really do think it needs to be home economics, right? Understanding of what it takes to run a household, what finances look like, because it is, I think, in terms of our life's journey, one of the most impactful things that we have to learn and understand. And I don't think that education is oftentimes being taught in the home. As I said, our parents can't teach us what they don't know. Our schools aren't really educating and
Mm-hmm.
teaching it to the degree and to the level that we need to. And it's not until, folks' life hits them, as it did me, that they gain an understanding of it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of folks, until they get enrolled in their first 401k at age 21, that they have any exposure to the stock market. For many
Mm-hmm.
people, their 401k or their retirement plan becomes their first exposure into investing. And so I think that needs to change. So I would say it begins with education,
And early education.
early education. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. What is one action for every woman listening? One action they should take.
I would say selfishly, get a financial advisor or a coach. I see folks run out every January, every gym is packed, you
Yeah.
know, and by April, everyone is, half of those people have left. And folks will spend hours doing reviews on, hey, I'm going to get a new trainer. I think the same excitement and energy needs to go into finding a coach or a, financial advisor, or someone to help them steer the ship,
Hmm.
early, is very important. So yeah, I would say people need to take that step. Get someone that's in their corner, or at least, if it's not someone or some, make it something. I mean, there's access to information, on such a high degree now, whether it's, through the internet, or, ChatGPT or Claude, or, AI technology. You can ask these questions, where it's, in the comfort of your home, or,
Hmm.
where you're not staring at another person. I think a lot of folks have a fear of being viewed as, oh, you should know this, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And so I think the technology allows people to access the information, without having to sit across from somebody and feel intimidated. And so, whether it's, classes online, or things like that, I think people need to take that step.
No, I agree. I think it's a shame how many people that we come across in the plans that we serve that think that they don't have enough money for a financial advisor. And that the financial advisor won't want to work with them. And then when I'm working with new financial advisors, because I do a lot of 401k training with new advisors that have just, started in the business and want to know more about 401ks. And the one thing I say to them is, you guys are so lucky because you are probably the only financial advisor some of these people are ever going to meet, and you can actually impact their lives for the better. So you need to take that seriously as part of your job, and you need to be passionate about it because these people need you. And those 401k advisors may be the only one they ever see because they are too nervous to ask somebody, or they think they don't have enough money. So I totally agree. I would encourage everybody to have a financial advisor. Cindy, what's one action you think every woman listening should take?
Well, I think you should remember your longevity, and when you're making these financial decisions that maybe are not going to be good for the next 20 years or so, think about, how you could change that. Like what do people think about in-home financial care for, um, for long-term care needs?
Mhm.
Um, like all the things you're buying this expensive car that maybe you won't even be able to drive, in a couple of years. Um, so it's those financial decisions, I think, that catch people up in many ways because they don't think of what their life is going to be like. Even when the signs are there, like other
Mhm.
people in the family, have these issues and they need to watch out for as well. So, and as
Yeah.
Stephen said in the beginning, it's sort of like we're all going to pass on at some point. So you want to pass on with as much as you can,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes. So when we get to Women's Retirement Security Day next year, what do you all think would make all of us feel like this has been a success and that we've made some real progress over the year?
Hmm. It is, there's an old phrase that, it's turning the ship, a ship in the night, right?
Mhm.
This is a game of inches. And I think we have to not only appreciate where we've been and where we've come from, but the direction that we're going.
Mhm.
It's hard to say. I mean, it's a game of inches. We're moving the needle little by little, one participant at a time, trying to help folks in general, make better decisions. It's hard from a perspective of, as Cindy said, you're making decisions today that will impact you 20 years from now. Not everybody has enough perspective or
Mhm.
long-term vision to see that. And so I think there are a lot of challenges in moving the needle and moving things along in the direction, but I think we're moving in the right on the right path. I think the efforts are being made, and I think things like, women's retirement security day and year and conversations, it matters. It makes an
Mhm.
impact. One thing I love about this industry is my ability to impact a lot of people and generationally. I've watched clients that were, go from single to married to divorced to remarried to now their kids are in college and now their kids are becoming clients. And that impact matters to me. Have changed lives. And I think as we move through this, we're going to look up hopefully a year from now, 10 years from now, and see the work that we've done has impacted not just a few people, but hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people, because, as I said before, we're all going to pass through this journey.
Mhm.
And at retirement, I've said this before, is there are two types of people, those with assets and those without. And I've yet to find the participant or client that says to me, Stephen, we've hit retirement, and oh my God, I'm so upset we have too much money. We're too well planned here. That conversation is yet to happen, and I think when it does, I'll press the button and retire myself. Um, so, those are the alternatives, those with assets and those without, those with knowledge and those without, those with access and those without. And I think
Mhm.
those are the questions that we need to answer and get more people on the with side of that equation.
Yeah. Cindy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just actually say some of the same things, but I think that if people know that all these things are out there, I mean, we've had 401k days for over
Yeah.
25 years, So, I mean, it's not like the pieces aren't out there for people. So I think, but everybody wants to invent a new way that, may not be the way for everyone either. So, um, anyway, I
Ye-
think, taking advantage of what's out there, and as Stephen said, I know a lot of women feel that way about, financial planners, or it has to be a woman, or, it doesn't have to be a woman, it there's just such individual experiences for people. So,
Mhm.
most of my mail now comes, a lot of it from end of life things and long-term care insurance, and I think all of those things are worth investigating. So those are good partners to have too, I think, so that people are really prepared.
Mhm.
But
What is a final message you all would give to a woman who feels behind?
Mhm.
Day late, dollar short. That's what we call it. So, um, I I think the only way to do anything about it is to get some professional help. And if you can save more, I mean, I think I don't like to see people beating themselves up because they've just done all these things for the people in their family. And so they've used up too much money. I mean, you just have to put your boots on and start, marching
Hmm.
to figure out how you're going to fix it. And you need help to do that. So, I mean, even the banks have people there that you can ask questions, you know, like, or just the basics. And I've known a lot of people that's how they started, was they just talk to the guy that sits in the chair with his name on his desk or something, and can give you some advice in the beginning anyway. So make sure you know what you're doing. So
No, it's
Stephen.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, listen, it's never going to get easier than it is today, right?
Hmm.
The procrastination is probably the biggest drawdown of success, right? Or detractor from potential success. And so start today, whether you're 50 and you're in the quote unquote retirement red zone, or whether you're 20 and thinking about, how do I pay for my rent? How do I, there are tools and resources readily available. Find a coach, find somebody to help guide you. But start, just begin. And it doesn't have to begin with perfection. It just begin, just start
Hmm.
somewhere. So that would be my guidance.
What's a final message you would give to an employer or a financial advisor who wants to help but doesn't know where to start?
Um, for a financial advisor, learn the industry. Yes, the technical skills matter. Learn people. Learn people. This is a people business.
Hmm.
And it's about connecting with individuals, and having a genuine interest in helping and serving others. And I think that's one of the soft skills that I don't know that they still teach in behavioral finance, and in these rooms where you're becoming an advisor. I remember, I know it wasn't part of my initial training. It was more about, hey, this is how the market works and runs. And so I think those soft skills, or I would tell an entry level advisor or a beginning advisor to learn the soft skills. How do you care for people? How do you listen?
Hmm.
Right? How do you learn from people? How do you speak to people? How do you meet them at their place of need? I would start with that as an advisor. The technical stuff, it changes, and there are ways to learn that. You'll always learn that, but if you can't make a common connection with somebody sitting across the table from you, then you're not going to be very good at this business, no matter how much technical skill you have. For a plan sponsor, I would say, the same thing. Go out and find a financial advisor.
Yeah.
These plans have gotten complicated. It's not as much as, hey, let me sign a piece of paper and now we have a plan, voila. It is, okay, now we've got a plan. How do we now guide our employees to retirement security and success?
Hmm.
How do we create opportunities for people to move into retirement comfortably, safely, and with the appropriate guidance? How do we put the appropriate resources around them? So, I would say the same thing to a plan sponsor: is find the resources, find somebody that genuinely cares about people,
Hmm.
and that has the technical skills and the resources to serve not only the plan but also its participants, because
Hmm.
that's what it's all about, is serving the participants.
I totally agree. I get so frustrated when a client comes to me and says, I haven't seen our financial advisor in 5 years, which we hear. I mean, it's not uncommon. And it's so frustrating. when that happens, because when you're choosing a financial advisor for your plan, you need to be choosing someone who's going to service the plan and service the participants. Otherwise, why have a plan?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is frustrating as well. You know, I when I started in the career, I would hear senior advisors say, deal with this participant, or I don't want to.
Hmm.
Well, why did you? Why are you doing the job then? That is the job is taking
Yeah.
care of the participants. And so whether you're serving the plan from the committee level down, or whether you're working doing one-on-ones with participants, that is the job.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
if that's what you've signed up for, then deliver on that.
exactly. Cindy, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree that it has to be one-on-one. Um, I mean, at least some of the time. I have
Yeah.
an insurance policy that on a property that I have, and every year when they give me the rising costs, I realize I haven't heard from them again the whole year.
Hmm.
I mean, I can figure out whether I want to continue the insurance, but it really aggravates me. So I'm sure that if they were my financial planner, they would not be for very long. So I think that's what people are looking for from
Hmm.
a good planner. I think they want to know, and they want to be asked those questions. Like I've done a lot of programs in the past of telling the planners, like, what are some of the things you can say that are going to make people happy that you're asking them? And, it becomes like, do you have the account for the sister who's been sick her whole life or something? And nobody else is going to be there to pick up the pieces for her care. Or, do you have anybody in your family? The more generic questions. People really like to hear that you're thinking of the whole holistic piece of this, that you might need extra savings to take care of. So anyway,
Thank you. Cindy and Stephen, I just want to thank you both so much for sharing your time and your insights and your perspectives with us today. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Gap. If you believe that you have an innovative approach to closing the gaps in the retirement savings for Americans and you would like to share your ideas, please let me know. My contact information is in the show notes. And if you want to get in touch with Cindy or Stephen, their contact information will be in the show notes as well. Don't forget to follow, share, and leave a review if you've enjoyed this conversation. Together, we can keep closing the gap one plan, one policy, and one participant at a time. Thank you.